Hi guys, welcome to Hungaroring and for the deep dive. Let me think. How do I want to start this? First, I think let me talk a little bit about our track conditions in the server because I think it's important. We have very slick conditions in our server settings. Um, so you're going to be fighting that all week long in your preparation and also at least part way into the race. The FP1 says that the track is fast, but I really don't think it is. I think it's essentially a green track, so there's virtually no traction whatsoever. FP2 is a little bit better, but I would call it just barely fast, and you really don't get into fast conditions until the start of FP3. And I honestly don't think we're going to see an optimal track until probably close to the midway point of the races on Sunday because it's going to take enough traffic to get it there. So that's important to understand that it's not just you. Everyone is going to be dealing with that, but it may affect how you set up your car in order to control what is going to be a lot of wheel spin for most everyone. So take that to heart. The first thing that I want to say about Hungaroring is that I think it is probably one of the most important braking tracks in ACC. Your your skill on the brakes and your ability to repeat what you're trying to do on the brakes, I think goes a very long way to determining how successful you are on this track and for this race. I think that it is a track that you need to know how to trail brake on. Unless you're on controller, I'll make that distinction right now because I think those are two different animals, and I just don't think it's easy to trail brake on a controller. It kind of forces you into a bit of a mashing style. So take that with a grain of salt if you're on controller. But if you're on a wheel, I think you have to know how to trail brake to really get around this track effectively. Um, and the upside is, I think this is my favorite place to come to learn how to trail brake or to improve your trail braking. Okay, and so the first thing I'm going to do is I set up a quick demonstration so that you can see the difference, particularly for those of you who are new and and still need to learn how to trail brake. Just a quick explainer in case you really are new to it. What is trail braking? It is the act of coming off the brakes later, more slowly, more gently, in order to essentially accomplish a couple different things. One, it will allow you to brake a little bit later, right, which is always a good thing. Two, it keeps a little bit of weight of the car's weight onto the nose and improves your grip on the front end as you go and turn into the corner. And three, it just overall stabilizes the car more, the balance of the car throughout the entry phase into the mid corner phase, right? All of those things allow you to carry more speed through a corner. So let's see, the first one here I think is an example of me doing turn one and turn two, trying not to use any trail braking at all. So I'm coming off of the brakes completely and quickly. Okay, so when you don't trail brake, it's much harder to get the speed of the corner correct. I think you'll have a tendency to run into mid corner understeer much more often because it's easy to carry too much speed into the entry of a corner. Trail braking allows you to smooth that out considerably, so that you're able to decide what the correct speed is that you need to be at much later in the corner by trail braking effectively into it. Hungaroring is fantastic to practice that, because turn one is a very garden variety typical hairpin that you're going to take in first gear most of the time for most people in most cars. And it also is a very flat corner. You don't have like the elevation or bumps that you have to deal with like at Nürburgring turn one, that kind of thing. So it's a very good typical corner that you would always see very skilled drivers trail braking into, and trail braking essentially all the way up to the apex, right? So it's a very good one to practice. It's followed by turn two, which is also a very heavy trail braking corner, but a little bit different, because you're going to carry more speed into turn two than you will into turn one, and there's a good chance that you're going to take it in second gear. So it's very similar in the sense that it's a very typical trail braking corner, but the dynamics of it are a little bit different than turn one. So the combination of those two make them very good for learning and practicing trail braking. The added benefit to doing them here at Hungaroring is that since those are the first two corners, you can set up a hot lap session and literally just practice those two corners over and over again. As soon as you get through turn two, reset back to the garage, and do it again. So it's a fantastic place to come and practice. So what I want you to do is watch the brake trace in turn one and turn two here. You'll see a very quick, abrupt release of the brakes, and that is not trail braking. So this is what you want to avoid. And notice how late that forces me to get back on the throttle. That's because I'm waiting for the nose to come around and catch up with what I'm trying to do. Same thing here, right? Okay, so that's what it looks like when you're not trail braking. Oh, damn it. Sorry, the next one's actually on that same replay. So I didn't need to back out. Okay, and this time I am trail braking in both corners, so you'll see me come off of the brakes much more gradually. The car rotates better. I'm able to get back on the throttle much sooner. Right? Okay. So that's the difference. So if it's a skill that you need to either learn or improve on, set up a hot lap session here at Hungaroring and work on turns one and turn two. Until you can feel that difference of releasing the brakes slowly so that the nose is coming in like you want it to, and not scrubbing speed and forcing you to wait on the throttle. Okay, so that hopefully that helps, but it's critical for this track in my opinion. So I think that's an important thing to point out before we get started in the deep dive. Okay. Okay, note on lap times real quick before I do this one. I think this one, if I remember right, was a 1:44.7. Um, I did this lap at the very beginning of FP3 because I think it's a little bit closer to the track conditions that we'll get in our actual qualifying session. The way that the server is currently set up, FP2 is extremely slick. Once we get some traffic on it, it'll rubber up a little bit. I don't think it will go optimum during qualifying, but I think that something in this range for Division One is I'm pretty sure qualifying time is going to wind up no better than a mid 44. I think that would probably be the best that we'll see, and I think probably more likely something closer to a 45. So this is a 44.7, and I think it's fairly representative. It's not perfect, but it'll get the job done for our purposes today. Let's see, and I think the race lap times. It's because the track is pretty slick. I think for Division One, we'll probably see some high 45s early on, but I think they're going to be a lot tougher to get into than we might typically expect. So I won't be surprised to see mostly 46s in the first half of the race, and then coming down in the second half of the race once the track rubbers up and everybody drops some of their fuel load and gets fresh tires on. So don't be the least bit surprised if in the second half of the race you run a better lap time than you have all week long. Right? That's kind of how I expect things to turn out. But we'll see based on how the grip levels come up during the race itself and during qualifying. Okay, so turn one. As I said there at the beginning, trail braking is a must. I hate the braking point on this car in the Lamborghini. The Lambo has okay brakes, but they're not the best brakes by any stretch of the imagination. And then there are just a lot of cars that can brake later, and that means that if you look to the left, you can see the 150 marker directly to up in front of us to the left, and beyond that is the 100-meter board plus the sign out there to the right of it. That's the only really decent marker to use, and it is better or worse depending on the car you have. As you'll see in the video I'm going to post after this, the Porsche, for instance, has fantastic brakes and can brake almost essentially right on those boards. But a lot of cars like the Lamborghini, you have to come back a good 5 meters or so, something along those lines. And that makes this a much more difficult braking point to judge if you're in a car that has to brake earlier than those, because it's easy to get fixated on those and just try to push your braking zone a little bit too far. That'll have you blow past the apex and create an enormous amount of understeer, and you'll just lose a ton of time going into this. So my braking point is in front of those two, depending on which car you're driving. If you're a fortunate one, you'll be able to get much closer, and I'm jealous of you if that's the case. But it's key that you figure out as close as you can exactly where your braking point is on this, and practice repeating it over and over and over again, because if you don't, then during the race you're going to blow this apex a lot and cost yourself a ton of time on your lap times. Because I trail brake in this corner, I keep the car out wide and shoot for a later apex. I think what you're going to find is, first of all, you can take plenty of this curb, but you don't actually need to, right? And I think that's important to keep in mind, particularly when the track conditions are as slick as they are, because when the grip is low on this track, it's really easy to get some wheel spin when you use this curb. I think you'll see that particularly true in FP1 and FP2. But you do not need to take that curb. You can come just beyond it on the white painted line and still get excellent lap times. Um, you absolutely do want to practice your trail braking, apex, and acceleration so that you are coming all the way out to the left side here. Your left side tires should be well off of the track at this point. If you're if you're inside the white boundary line, you are probably costing yourself a considerable amount of time. So you definitely want to be out here on the exit. You have plenty of time to work yourself back to the right, so it's not an issue at all. Okay, turn two. The the beginning of the curbing on the right hand side is my brake marker that I use, and this is a corner that has, I think, a few different ways you can take it. I think turn one, you're probably going to need to be pretty close to the way that I just took it to be successful through it. This corner, though, I think there's a lot more wiggle room depending upon your style and the car that you drive. So my approach is I'm going to brake essentially right on the beginning of the marker, and I'm going to hold the car out to the middle of the track as I brake. Right, I'm not going to dive into the corner. Um, the the options are, I think that some cars you can hold the car out to the right even wider than I do. And depending on your car and your style, you may find a much more narrow approach and more of a V-shaped double apex appropriate for you. I think that approach, that inside approach with a sharper V, is also more appropriate if you decide that first gear is your best option in this corner. But if you're taking it in second gear, like I am, I think you're almost certainly going to want to hold the car out into the middle of the track or a little bit middle right and shoot for a late apex. The advantage of second gear in this corner and a lot of corners on this track that you'll see me take second gear in are that the power oversteer is and wheel spin are a legitimate concern in virtually every car on this track. When you're exiting a lot of these different corners where you're going to have the option between first and second gear. First gear is going to exaggerate that problem. It won't be as big of a deal once we get into the second half of the race and everybody's got fresh tires and the track goes optimum. But it is going to be an issue during qualifying and the early part of the race, in my opinion. Second gear is going to allow you to use or to minimize the amount of torque the car has to help control that wheel spin. Now, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get the car pointed at the apex where you want to. So it's going to take some skill on the brakes to be able to modulate your speed to the point where you need to get it to in order to both hold second gear and and hit the apex like you want to without creating understeer. Because when you take it in second gear, it is easier to carry too much speed and force understeer into the car, making it hard to get the nose pointed around. But if you practice it enough so that you can trail brake well into the corner in second gear, get the speed where you need to, you will be able to get the nose turned in, and I think you will be able to carry more speed as a result. But those are the basic options as I see them. But since I do it in second gear, I shoot for a late apex. You can see the trail braking where I'm holding, and now I'm starting to come onto the throttle. This corner and a couple of other ones on this track, great patience is required on the throttle. You really need to watch yourself, and it's because of that wheel spin that is so easy to get here at Hungaroring. So you're going to have to be disciplined on your throttle application on the exit of this corner. Otherwise, if you start if you get on the gas too soon, you're going to create understeer. You're going to push yourself very wide on the exit, or you're going to get the power oversteer that is going to cause you a loss of traction and a loss of time. So, throttle discipline here at this point as you begin your exit. As tends to be very typical of me and my style, I sacrifice more than a lot of people will in this corner, and take a much narrower exit. So I will stick farther to the inside for longer than a lot of people will. Depending on your car and your style, you will see a lot of people open up the steering and the throttle and allow the car to drift out towards the center of the track on their exit here. And if you can do that and still comfortably get set up for the fast right-hander, where you could still take the fast right-hander at full throttle, knock yourself out. For me in the Lamborghini, I feel like I have to get all the way over to the left side and get set up well for the right-hander, because I cannot mess with that curb on the right-hand side. So I think it limits me a little bit in that sense, and also just a stylistic choice. I tend to sacrifice the first corner more in a combination of corners than a lot of people do to make sure that that I'm getting myself set up to go full throttle and hit that every time. So you can see how narrow I come out here. Many people will come out another, half a car width or more to the right than I will, and just try to get back over to the left as quickly as they can. Nothing wrong with that, as long as you are able to. You'll be full throttle at this point. You should be able to take this right-hander from this point without lifting. Okay, that's the key. You are now going on to what is essentially one of the longest straightaways on this course, which means that your exit from this corner, from turn 2, and your approach to turn 3 are absolutely critical. Once you go full throttle on the exit to turn 2, you have to be able to maintain full throttle all the way up down to the end of the straightaway that's coming up. If you can't, I think you need to make an adjustment because you're costing yourself time. Okay, so the key is, depending on what car you drive, how well it handles this curb on the right-hand side. I don't want to do anything more than brush the red and white striped curbing. Really, anything more, and I'm taking my life into my own hands. So a lot of the cars are going to be able to handle it better. Some of them are going to be able to absolutely pummel this thing without, it may disrupt the balance of the car, but there's no real danger. But the Lamborghini, the McLaren, I think the Audi. To a certain extent, those are all much more dodgy on this, and eventually it's going to come back and bite you, and you're going to wreck the car if you mess with that curb too much. So what your car can do on this curb will go a long way to determining what you decide to do on the exit here of turn 2. The more you can mess with that curb, the less you have to get to the left on the exit here to open up the right-hander. Okay, um, because you have more room to play with. If you're like me and you can't mess with that curb, then your priority is to get as far to the left as possible, so that you can still make that turn at full throttle. In a car, the Ferrari is actually pretty solid over this curb. The Bentley, can eat it for lunch. So can the Lexus. There are other. The Merc is surprisingly, I thought, um, was surprisingly bouncy through this curb. It may be a setup issue, but it surprised me that it wasn't better on that curb than I thought it would be. But if you're driving one of those cars that handles it well, then you will likely be able to get on the throttle earlier and harder on your exit here. Let the car drift out wider to the right, and still be able to get back far enough to the left so that you can stay full throttle, catch more of the curb, and be perfectly fine on your exit. But the whatever choice you make, whatever choice you wind up making, the two keys are: once you go full throttle here, you have to stay full throttle, and on the exit, you have to be able to control it so that you are not blowing the track limits on the left-hand side for your exit. Because while you do want to go very wide on the exit here, it is one of those areas, and there's essentially 3 primary areas on this track, that will get you in trouble from the standpoint of track limits. This is the first one. It's very easy to get too aggressive on your exit for this corner and put yourself in a position where you are violating track limits, and yeah, you'll get a drive-through, eventually if you're not careful. So whatever you choose to do, make sure you're able to control your exit enough to avoid the track limit violation the vast majority of the time. If you're running practice laps and you're constantly invalidating your lap on the exit there, then I think you want to re-examine what you're doing, because it'll come back to haunt you in the race. Okay, this fast left-hander is a brilliant corner in my opinion. And yeah, I just think it's a great corner because it's fast, it's blind. Track limits are again a serious issue on the exit to it. It is if you don't know what you're doing, it's very easy to lose the car and put yourself into the wall. So it's just a great corner in my opinion. And let's go overhead and look at it from the standpoint of the apex. Okay, I am in the Lamborghini, and you can see how much of the curb that I am taking. If I can do it, so can you. And in my opinion, you need to. So if you're practicing this and you're not consistently getting your left wheels up onto the gray part of the curb, then I think you are asking or you're at the very least, I think you're losing lap time, and at worst, I think you're setting yourself up for disaster. Because this curb, although it's a big curb and it's a big bump, I don't think it upsets the car, any of the cars, nearly as much as most of the other curbs on this track. So there are things you may need to do from a setup standpoint to improve your ability to negotiate this corner successfully. But I think you have to do that, right? If you're not up here this far onto the curb, then I think you're doing something wrong. Okay. The other key part is obviously the exit. You can run out onto the red and white striping, but just like the previous exit, it is a nightmare for track limit violations and will get yourself into a drive-through. Okay. One of the reasons that I take the corner the way I do is so that that is not an issue for me, right? So let's back up and take a look at it. Okay, first things first, you'll notice that I approach it from the center or the center left side of the track. The corner, the entry itself curves away from you to the right. So if you approach this corner from the center right or the right side of the track, all you're doing is making it impossible for you to open up the left-hander, right? So the angle that you approach this corner can be very important. You do not want to get too far to the right. I think you want to be at least out to the middle of the track, if not center left. Because what you can do when you come at it that way is I treat this curb almost like a wake if I'm water skiing, right? So anyone who's done any water skiing knows that that you can come up onto a wake on skis and essentially bounce right off of it, right? You can use it to help you turn and cut, and that's what I do on this curb. So I come into it from the left-hand side, and you'll see me brake and start turning the steering wheel essentially at the same time. And all essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the right side tires to almost bounce off of that curb to assist my turn. Let me back up so I can. So yeah, when I get to this point, I'm aiming for the curb. And then right at the beginning of it is where I hit the brakes, start turning the wheel, and aim right for the top of the gray. Now that gives you a fantastic and controllable angle on your exit where the track limits are not an issue, right? Different cars are going to handle it slightly differently, but that is the basic premise of what I'm trying to accomplish. Let me think. One thing I want you to notice on the steering is that when I make that move where I hit the curb, at the same time that I brake and start turning to the left, I stop turning to the left. It is one of the mistakes that you'll make here is to turn in too early, right? And you actually need to delay your real turn in for just a heartbeat or so. Okay, so so when I essentially set that bounce off of the curb, I'm setting everything, but then I'm pausing there for just a second before I actually do my corner entry. If you do start doing all of your turning right here at the beginning of the curb, that's where you're going to be coming too sharply over it. You're either going to come too high up onto the curb and actually cause yourself an imbalance in the car that wrecks you, or it's going to force you to flatten out your steering at the last minute, and that is what's going to put you off into the side of the track where you're getting the track limits violation. So I think it's important that that initial move to the left when you start your corner entry is set and then held for just a second before you actually do the primary turn into the corner. Try it. I think it will make sense to you once you do it yourself, but you'll see me do it right here. All right, so there's the move. Then I hold it. And there's the bigger turn in into the corner itself. There are a lot of times when you get this right where you can start going back onto the throttle right now on top of the curb. It just depends on how well the car stays balanced or not, you know. But when you hit it perfect, you can absolutely go full throttle right now at this point. But worst case scenario, you'll have to wait for it just a little bit to settle, and then you can go back on the throttle. But at this point, you're in no danger whatsoever of either crashing or getting a track limit violation. Okay, so you come off of the exit, and I technically, I think there are a couple of different ways to take this corner, as in a wide entry, late apex, versus a narrower entry with a double apex. Technically, I think you can take the double apex here with a narrower entry, but I don't think it works. I really don't. Um, if you're stuck on it and you love it, you know, by all means. But I just think it overslows the car and puts you in a bad balance position on this, and you lose a lot of time. So for what it's worth, that's my thought. But having said that, my approach is get the car out to the left as quickly as I can, and then turn it in so that I can do much more of a straight line brake. My braking point is, as you see the curbing ending on the right side, it's the red portion of the end of the curb. That is what I use. A lot of people like to use the end of the green and blue barrier on the left side. It's in a great position, so if that works for you, by all means, stick with it. But by and large, anytime I can get a brake reference that is on the inside of the track towards the corner, which is where I want my eyes to be, that's the one I'm going to use, and that's why I use the red curb on the inside as opposed to the barrier on the outside. And I'm essentially looking to brake as soon as I get alongside of it. I'll straighten up the wheel a bit and essentially brake to the center of the track. This is one that I will take in second gear, and I do think that it is a mistake to take this in first gear. This is part of what I was talking about with the double apex. If you're double apexing this, I think you're probably taking it in first gear, and I just don't think you want to, not on this corner. So I'll take it in second gear. That will help to control the rear wheel spin that you're liable to get mid corner and at the beginning of corner exit. And I'll do a late apex. It is another corner very similar to a couple of the other ones on this track, where you're going to have to be very patient on your throttle. You're just going to have to hold it through a good portion of the corner until you get far enough that you can really open it up. And I think that tower, you know, in front of us is, if you want a visual reference, is a pretty good one. Where in relation to that tower you start to get full throttle will depend entirely on the track conditions. You know, right now, because of the settings in our server and the low grip conditions, you're going to have to be more patient, and you know the nose is probably going to be all the way up to it before you're really able to get back on the throttle. But there's a decent chance that once the track conditions get good enough and that wheel spin becomes less of an issue, you'll be able to get back onto the gas much earlier. But if you need a visual reference, that tower is not a bad one. Regardless of what you use, the key obviously is just patience on the throttle, waiting until you know the nose has come around sufficiently for you to get back on the throttle without the back end sliding out from under you. In a perfect world, I think you want to exit all the way out onto the curbing on the left-hand side so that your wheels are over the red and white striping. For whatever reason, it is something I have always struggled to do on my exit to this corner. So I don't get far enough. I don't get as far out as I think I would like to ideally. If you do, congratulations, because you're negotiating the exit of this corner better than I've ever managed to. But you have a lot of room to play with. So the sooner that you're able to open up the throttle, open up the steering, and get the car back to full power, the better. If that takes you all the way out onto the red and white striping, bueno, you know. Okay, the chicane. Let's see. Let's go. Let's go up to the first apex to begin with. Um, the Lamborghini, as usual, can't handle that sausage curb that's up on top. And it can't handle the one on the left side either. Neither can the McLaren, as per usual. The Bentley is absolutely brilliant on those things and can just beat them all to hell. The Porsche is surprisingly good on these two sausage curbs. And a couple of the other cars are not particularly deadly either as far as taking them. So, as usual, what you can do on these curves will largely drive what you're able to do as far as your entry and all of that. The the thing that I think is important is you'll notice that before I get to the apex of the left-hander, I am already full throttle. To me, that is the key to this chicane, right? That whatever you decide to do from the standpoint of your approach on this chicane, the requirement is that you must be full throttle before you ever get to the apex of the left-hander, okay? And the reason is that you actually have a pretty decent amount of room on the exit, right, where you're not going to have to come off the gas unless you make a mistake. So it gives you a nice little straightaway here where you're going to be full throttle and you don't want to waste that, right? So for me, that means that since I can't mess with the sausage curbs, but I want to be full throttle as quick as I can, that means I have to sacrifice a lot in the right-hander, okay? So my angle coming through at this point is going to be more severe than it will necessarily be for you, depending on the car that you're driving, right? You may be able to take a much more straight line approach over that sausage curb than I can, and still be able to get your car positioned properly to go full throttle right here in between the two of them, right? Because at this point in the Lamborghini, because I'm far enough to the right, I can now go full throttle, clip the red and white stripe curbing on the left-hand side, and still be able to get the car turned with enough room to put my right side tires on the red and white striping on exit and never come off the throttle. Okay? So that basic approach, I think, is what you're looking for, but how well your car handles those curbs will determine the angle that you take, and the entry and all that sort of thing. So for me, I start braking right at the as I get up to the beginning of the red and white striped curbing on the left-hand side, and I will hold it for a very long time out there because I need to create more angle into the first right-hander. I also take this in second gear. A lot of people take this in first gear, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But just, I think stylistically, I prefer to use second gear to control the wheel spin because it's another significant factor once you start getting up to the left-hander, both on the entry and the exit. Wheel spin is can be a real problem, and I think second gear helps to control that significantly, and also prevents you from overslowing the car at your entry into the right-hander. So start braking right at the beginning of it. Hold it out here all the way to the left with a late entry and essentially a late apex into the right-hander. That keeps me off of the sausage curb and provides me the angle I need to be able to straighten up the car, go immediately to full throttle with enough room to stay full throttle on my exit and not run off. And I can tell you this, if I try to do that in first gear, my apex speeds will be slower, and the back end is going to be moving around on me a lot more. So play with it, see what works for you. But for me, second gear. Okay, the S's. I think when you're new to this track, and still trying to learn how to get fast on it, this next series of corners are, there's a good chance they're your least favorite corners on the track, and I totally get why, because they confounded me too for the longest time. They're hard, they really are. It's hard to figure out exactly what to do on these corners. So I'm going to try and try to give you some information that will help you. Okay, first of all, so referring back to where I said at the very beginning of this video that how you handle your braking largely determines your success on this track. Part of that is your ability to trail brake. The other part of it comes right here in the S's, because these two left-handers require a very delicate touch on the brakes to get through them quickly, right? Because what's happening, right? We've talked about this before in other videos, but it's exceptionally important in these corners, and that is the balance of the car. Because how well you balance the car at the entry and apex of those three corners are going to determine how well you succeed. So let's watch the movement of the car first, just so you can see how much weight is shifting and at what kind of speeds they're shifting, so you can see how important it is to these corners. I mean, that's a whole lot of motion, right, for the car at fairly high speeds, and on a track where you do not have particularly good grip, right? So that means that if you let the balance of the car get out of control, you're going to get yourself in trouble, and you're going to be forced to overslow the car in order to compensate for the mistakes you're making in with the balance of the car, right? So let's let's use this cam view in order to go through it, so we can talk about the balance of the car at the same time. The first thing you've got to understand is you must practice a deft touch on the brakes in all three of these corners. One of the reasons that's particularly difficult on this track is because the entire rest of the track is essentially a heavy braking zone, right? You're going to be going wham, 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 wham over and over and over again all over this track. And that puts you into a rhythm on your braking that will not serve you in these corners. So what I'm going to suggest first of all is that when you are preparing this week and practicing, when you get to these corners, I want you to put a mental switch inside of your head that you flip every time you come off of the chicane, right? And that mental switch needs to be okay, gentle now, right? For these next three corners, gentle. And then I can go back to my, heavy braking zones. But every time I get to this point on the track, I need to be thinking gentle on the brakes. Okay? If you do that and you practice that, I think it will help you quite a bit, because it really is a big difference in feel on the brakes between this section and every other spot on the track. And I think it's important to understand that that's a difference, and practice that difference, right? Because they're completely different. So let's see. The pole on the left-hand side is what everyone uses as their braking reference on this. I am no different. And that is, as soon as I get alongside of it, that is what I'm going to do. And at this point, when I'm tapping the brakes, I'm thinking tap the brakes, gentle, soft, all of those things. Clobber this curb. You must clobber this curb because you need to get the car turned as quickly as you can, because on the exit here, you must get over to the left side of the track. I don't mean center left, I mean left side of the track as far as you can. Um, those the GT World Challenge signs that are up on the fence to the left over here, aim for them, and practice getting the nose of the car as far out here to the left as you can, because um, this is another corner where once you exit it, you're going to be going full throttle um, for a relatively large amount of time, right? At least on this track. So you must be able to get onto the throttle as quickly and fully as possible on your exit to the right-hander, and the only way you can do that is if you're opening it up enough. Only way to open it up is to get over to the left-hand side. The yeah, it's not very good actually. I want to be even further left than I am right here. But if you're in the center of the track or center right, you're killing yourself, and you need to go back and look at what you're doing in the previous corner, the left-hander. Because when you take that left-hander, you must exit it in a position to get yourself as far over here to the left as you possibly can. Okay. The Be a little bit be a little bit careful and patient on your application of the throttle as you exit this corner, because your line that you take is not the only thing that will put you over on the right side of the track. Also, getting back on the accelerator will too, because that will create understeer, right? So, so look at both your line you're taking and watch your acceleration on the exit here to help yourself get over to the left-hand side. I'm going to switch to my normal view for just a second. Okay, so the see the Marshall stand over on the right-hand side. That is my braking point for the right-hander. And once again, I am still thinking in my head, soft, gentle, easy on the brakes. I don't want to go very hard here. So as soon as that passes out of my peripheral vision, then I am going as gently as I can on the brake in order to do nothing more than get the nose turned in, right? That's all I'm after. I don't want to bleed a lot of speed there. I just want to get the nose turned. You absolutely can and probably should be at least brushing the red and white striped curbing. But keep this in mind. This is another one that I'll call a practice tip for you. Particularly while the track is the grip conditions are slow. It's much more likely that you're going to induce rear wheel spin mid corner and exit as you come over this red and white striped curbing, right? So that does not mean you should avoid this curb. What it does mean is, and what I think you can practice, is understanding that you are probably going to have to counter steer as you start to exit this corner, right? And you can practice doing that. In other words, instead of waiting to see whether or not the car starts sliding on you and then counter steering, you can start counter steering a little bit mid corner here to account for the wheel spin that you will most likely get. That's an excellent technique to practice, and this is a good place to do it, okay? Regardless, you want your car all the way out here onto the left side of the track. If you're not, you're just not using enough of the track, because from this point you're going full throttle, and even if you get this far to the left, you are not going to have to release the throttle in order to make the next corner. So the farther you get to the left on your exit, it means the sooner you can get fully back on the throttle when you're coming out of the corner. So practice getting the car out here to the left all the way on your exit. You should work the car over to the right before you make the left-hander, but you do not have to get all the way to the right. This corner, although it is a fast corner, I think every car in the game is going to be able to take this flat out without too much trouble. So get your car over to the right as much as you can realistically, but you don't need, this is one where you don't need to fight to get the car over there to the right hand side. You're still going to be able to turn in and carry full throttle through the left-hander. But aim for the curb, you know. Don't let yourself drift out too wide. You want to get the apex in here. Otherwise you will induce some understeer and have to lift. So be sure that you really do practice getting the nose up into this red and white curb. If you do that, that will make it far easier to to once again get all the way over to the left-hand side in preparation for the last right-hander in the S's. It's much harder to do if you allow the car to get to the center of the track or center right of the track. You put yourself in a very bad angle. So you definitely want to catch the curb on the left-hander so that your exit here is shallow enough to make it easy on yourself to get to the left-hand side of the track and in a good position to open up this corner. For I think every car and pretty much every one, the beginning of the curbing on the left-hand side is going to be your brake reference. Exactly where you brake in relation to that is going to depend on the car you're driving and your skill on the brakes. Okay. I think let's see, the Lambo. I brake just a little bit before it. The Ferrari was surprisingly good. Through these S's. Of all of the cars that I lapped this track with earlier today, and you'll see that in a separate video, the Ferrari was probably the best through the S's, and it could really brake very late and still remain stable and turn in well into this right-hander. It was actually quite impressive. So I'm a little bit before the curb, I think, in the Lambo, whereas I was pretty much right on the curb by the time I broke in the Ferrari. So yeah, just before the curb. Again, gentle, you know, um, and and get your wheels onto the red and white stripe curbing. I may catch this apex just a little earlier. I think I did. Yeah. So turned in just a little bit earlier than I would have ideally, but it's not bad. That delays me getting back onto the throttle more than I would want to. In a perfect world, I'll be full throttle as soon as I hit the apex of the red and white striped curbing. So my entry there was a little bit too early and therefore too shallow. You know, I needed to come in just a little bit wider than I did in order to get back on the throttle fully. But it was pretty close. And when you do that approach, that's going to let you carry the car all the way out here without getting yet another track limits violation. Okay, so that's you have 3 places on this track which are notorious for track limit violations, and you need to build that into your prep to make sure that the exits, the way you're taking each of those 3 corners, doesn't put you in a position where your exit is constantly threatening the track limits here and at the other 2 fast corners, right? Otherwise, you're going to get a drive-through, even in a shorter hour-long race. You know what I mean? So practice it. Make sure that you can get out here onto the curbing without running into a track limit violation very often. You know what I mean? Okay, so that's the S's, and we'll go back to the normal view because we're getting back into the heavy braking zones in the last few corners. This is probably my least favorite corner on the track. Once again, the beginning of the curbing is my braking reference, and I don't know. I think this is a corner where either first or second gear is a legitimate option. Once again, I take it in second gear, and I do that to minimize the wheel spin that I get due to the torquiness of the Lamborghini. But a lot of people will take this in first gear, and that's perfectly fine. The how much of the curb you take is again dependent upon the car. I try not to take very much of it because it delays my ability to get back on the throttle. and improves the chances of me spinning the wheels. So I'll brake right here as I come up to the beginning of the curbing, hold it out to the left, keep it in second gear, and just try to brush the red and white striped curbing at the apex. Um, by doing that, it lets me, straighten the car out relatively early and get back onto the throttle hard. But but I'm not a big fan of this corner. I find that it's one I have a hard time really repeating exactly what it is that I want to do. Um, sometimes I'll catch too much of the curb, sometimes too little. It's just one of those where it never quite feels like the car reacts the same way every time through it. So yeah, you do need to be careful on this exit because if you get back on the throttle here when you're out here this far to the left, and you need to be this far out on the left to the left on your exit. But if you are still turning the car quite a bit and you go back on the throttle with your left rear tire on the AstroTurf there, it will absolutely power oversteer on you badly and spin the car. So beware of that. Check your car and see whether or not that's a legitimate issue. If it is, then you either need um, to get the car straightened up sooner so that you can go full throttle, or delay your throttle, your maximum throttle application until you are able to get the car more straight. But if you're struggling with that, the reason is because it's a combination of too much throttle and too much steering angle still in the steering wheel that is creating the slippage on the left rear tire on the AstroTurf. So watch out for that. Let's see. Okay, the penultimate corner, the left-hander. You absolutely want to get back over to the right side as far as you can, as quickly as you can. And this is, I would say, another corner that I think most everyone hates the brake references that are available to you. I know I certainly do. Okay, so what do you have available to you? you have the um, you have the sign overhead, right? That you can use. Um, I don't like it as much. If you look to the left-hand side, you can see the blue and green barrier ending. It is the end of that barrier that I use rather than the overhead sign. But either one, I think, will work okay. Use whichever one is most comfortable for you. Your breaking point is going to have to be beyond both of those. There's no question in my mind about that. Um, but but neither of them are fantastic. And I think it's easy to, just like turn one, it's easy to push your braking too late here and miss the apex, get a whole bunch of understeer, and screw this corner up as a result. Okay. Let's see. From a line standpoint, I do think I do take this one in first gear, and I think that most people will. Um, I also think this is a late apex corner rather than a double apex V-shaped corner. Um, but I think one thing that I want to show you because it might help you. And I think, how do I want to do this? I'm going to do this at full speed first and see if you can tell. Um, this does not work for every car, but it works well for a lot of them. Just depends on how the different cars are geared. Okay. What I do in my braking and turn in for this corner, it works well in the Lamborghini and quite a few other cars. Okay, is I'm going to get as far out to the left or to the right as I can, right? Get the car pointed into the center of the track as I go heavily onto the brakes, and then I'm going to be downshifting from third gear to first gear. Okay, and if you time that well, if you practice that and time it well, the downshift into first gear and the grabbing of the engine brake will help you turn the nose right there at the apex, and it works brilliantly. Okay, and it allows you to brake later if you practice that and work on it, and assuming it works in your car. But I drove a lot of the cars, and it worked in a surprisingly large number of them. So let's go full speed and see if that. I don't know if you can pick that up. It's something I can feel when I'm doing it. I don't know if it's something you can just see and hear. Yeah, I don't think it's as obvious when you just watch it, but with force feedback in your hands, I can absolutely feel that the engine brake grab right at the moment that I do my heavy turn in, and it really helps the Lambo move through that corner. So give that some thought in your practice and see if it helps you. Notice how, just from a visual standpoint, notice how long the nose of the car stays to the right of the Fanatec sign. Um, that's a decent visual reference to help you get a late apex on this corner. You know what I mean? If you get to this point and you're already pointed directly at the Fanatec sign, then there's a good chance that you are going to be forced to overslow the car. You're going to turn the car right into that curb, which is really going to mess you up. So you might be able to use that Fanatec reference. Watch your replays and let that help you judge whether or not you're taking a good line to catch a late apex through here. Because this corner and the last corner, if you catch these curbs on the inside, it's really the nose just digs into them badly and slows the car down. If you're getting back on the gas when you're on them, the back end will just spin right around on you. But catch that late apex and get opened up quickly and back on the throttle and aim out there to the right side, out toward the pit lane. You should be running either pretty close or all the way up into the essentially into the pit entry on the exit here. So here comes the line for the pit entry. If you get farther out than I did, no problem whatsoever. You really should be trying to open up the exit of the left-hander there. But wherever you come out, get your butt as quickly as you can back over to the left side and just aim for that Marshall stand right in front of us, right? Because you want to get the car up here right next to the white boundary line, and then start turning it in. This is not a corner where you want to straight line brake into and then turn late. Okay, it is a late apex, but it is a relatively early entry as far as late apexes go, right? So my braking point is the Marshall stand, and I will get the car out to the left-hand side, start turning it in so that it's pointed towards the middle of the track, or even a little bit inside of the middle of the track. And then as I get past the Marshall stand on the left-hand side, that's when I'll get on the brakes. Um, this should be second gear, I think, for most everybody. It's a tight corner, but I think it's too fast to take in first gear. I'm pretty sure first gear is going to be slowing you down too much in essentially every car that I can think of. So it should be second gear for everybody. But so you break into the more of the middle of the track, center right, and then just hold it there because you have to be extremely patient because the apex isn't until you start getting up to the barrier here for the pit lane. You know, this is really where the apex comes. It's really pretty late. But again, hold it, but keep it off of the curb. Be exceptionally patient on the throttle to avoid the power oversteer wheel spin that is so common, and then get your steering opened up as soon as you're able to, back to full throttle, and let it run out once again all the way onto the curbing on the left side. Makes sense? Cool. Okay, so there's the detailed lap. Let's do some full speed laps inside and outside. Let's see what that was. I think it was a 44.7. Yeah, 44.7. The just to give you a frame of reference, if I were to switch, go to like a practice session or a hot lap session where I set it up into optimum conditions, I would be threatening a 43 within a few laps. That's how bad the grip conditions are that we're dealing with, and this is in FP3 on our server where the grip conditions are starting the best. So it's not particularly good. And overhead. Um, you've really got to work to use all of the track. So take a look at these lines and and watch replays of yours to see where you are where you're coming up short. Cool. Okay, let me think. Yeah, that's it for this. Hope that helps. There's one other thing you're going to see me post. It was just something I wanted to try, frankly. Is I took every one of, at least I think so. I lapped every one of the cars that people drive in BMR Americas um, earlier today. And so that I could give you an example lap of each one of those cars here on this track. So that'll be a second video that you see up on my Twitch feed, and hopefully that I just want to see whether or not that is of any assistance, to be honest. And it was kind of fun. But so that's it for this. I hope the deep dive helps, and have good practice this week, guys. And let me know if you have any questions. We'll see you later. Bye.